Investigators are trying to figure out why the co-pilot of the Germanwings flight deliberately crashed the plane. Germanwings' parent company, Lufthansa, says First Officer Andreas Lubitz waited for the captain to exit the cockpit, then locked the door. All 150 on board died. Investigators say the cockpit voice recorder reveals the noise of gentle knocks becoming increasingly frantic before an attempt to break down that door to get in the cockpit. Close to impact, you can hear screaming.
The doors are technically set up so that they can always be opened from the inside. When that is not possible, there is the option of opening the doors from the outside with a code, unless this is explicitly blocked from the inside.
Investigators say they are now looking through Lubitz's relationships, communications, and also the co-pilot's recent whereabouts.
Ron McCallum is a commercial airline pilot and also an instructor, and we've asked him to break down some of the things we know about Germanwings and the crash. So Ron, let's begin with, I don't know, I guess what you suspect. The door was locked from the inside. Investigators say he drove the plane into the ground. What do you suspect about happened as the pilot left and tried to re-enter? What's your suspicion?
Well, from what we know so far, it appears that the co-pilot, the first officer, moved one of the toggle switches that controls the door to lock.
So when a pilot leaves, he usually can punch in a code to get back in?
That is correct.
From the outside.
That's right. If it's set to normal, that's true.
But I guess 9/11 ushered in this thing. If there's a terrorist out there and say, I'm going to kill everybody, open that door, then that allows the pilot inside to say, I'm not opening it for anything.
Well, the pilot, if it's set to normal and no one knows the code, they can't get in.
Right.
But if they're worried about it and want to take the extra precaution, they can put it to lock.
And then nobody from the outside can get in.
Well, they shouldn't be able to get in without the code anyway.
Okay.
But when they move it to the lock position, it locks for 5 minutes.
Okay, so we're looking at this door, and I think a lot of people say, why is this so strong? Why can't you knock that down? And it doesn't. We've all sat in an airplane and said, it doesn't look that big a deal, but they just can't get in.
Well, true. It's made of a ballistic material that's bulletproof, and it's very strong. And although it's lightweight because it's used in an aircraft, it's still a very strong and virtually impenetrable door. It's meant to be that way. It did its purpose here.
Right. Because of 9/11, they want it to be impenetrable from the outside, and it was.
Well, that's true.
And now we've got another issue that people are talking about. One of the answers I've heard talked about is what happens in the United States. If the pilot or co-pilot needs to leave, a flight crew member goes in. But that flight crew member doesn't fly the plane. That flight crew member is, I guess, just there to open the door if necessary, or maybe lock the door if necessary.
That's partly true. One of the other, most protocols for U.S. airlines for the flight attendant or other crew member to come in the cockpit is to visually identify who's coming back in, whether it's the first officer or the captain.
Okay. Do you think that's a big fix? I know in Canada they already put something in place that they're going to require that, and some of the European airliners are rushing to do that. Is that a fix?
Well, it makes sense now, doesn't it? I mean, if you visually identify somebody coming back in, you prevent the terrorists coming in the cockpit, and if you've got somebody else in the cockpit, even if they're a non-pilot, there's something that possibly they can do, if properly trained, to let the cockpit be open again for the other pilot to come in.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people are thinking, how can this be stopped? How can we never have this happen again? I got to believe some of this is a money thing. If we're willing to pay $800 to fly to Austin, and the airlines are willing to put 4 pilots in the cockpit, then this never happens. This scenario.
Well, we've got to be reasonable with the way we operate the airlines and how we travel as a public.
Sure.
But the safety rule is, after all, we shouldn't have a captain or a first officer or a required crew member getting locked out of the cockpit, right? I mean, I think that's a generally good safety rule. There are ways to design around this, and I think this is maybe a good opportunity for the designers of this aircraft and this door to look at other ways.
Do you have a suggestion? I don't want to get. I know you want to stay away from safety and insider deals, but what are you talking about?
Well, for instance, in my practice, if I was going to look at this forensically, I'd hire an engineer.
Okay.
Any good engineer would tell you that after you've had multiple events like this, which this has happened before, it's time to relook at the system and relook at the way it works.
And let's talk about that. I talked with another commercial airline pilot today. He says, you know what? The planes are almost perfect now. Mechanically, they fly well. Technologically, now these incidents we hear about are human. That's where the problem is. Misreacting, maybe not doing something right. So do we need to look at the humans more? Better background checks, more investigation of their past, what they're doing now, how they're behaving. Is that the answer?
Well, part of the human element of flying an aircraft is called crew resource management. I helped develop the curriculum for that at the University of Oklahoma, where I was trained. That is going to be the interface between the crew themselves and the aircraft, right? It is difficult, as you've probably heard, for the FAA to fully vet someone's psychological background. Psychological problems are very personal to a lot of people, and it's difficult to discover. I can tell you that one...
You have to. It's to the point. We have to.
Well...
I mean, privacy, I understand privacy, but
I'm not talking about
Gotta find these
privacy. As a nation, in the short term, we've been flying these type of aircraft, or aviation in general. Pilots do not endeavor and spend all the money and time that it takes to become a pilot, particularly at this level, to go commit suicide. It's atypical.
So, but you still, I mean, you're not saying that these things don't pop up, because they do. I mean, so how do we, I don't know, what's your point?
My point is, it's an aberration in my mind.
Okay.
I don't see this happening very often.
It's not worth a lot of spending a bunch of money and getting really invasive in people's lives, I guess.
The FAA is pretty invasive in a pilot's life, I can tell you that.
Okay, all right, that's good. How about something else? I've heard about maybe live stream cameras in the cockpit, which I don't think would do anything other than capture a horrible moment. How about we fly drones from the ground? Is there something where somebody on the ground could be a fallback and take over? I mean, this is crazy ideas, but what's out there?
There's been discussions of pilotless cockpits. Right now, it's not reasonable or feasible for a lot of reasons. One of them is computers do not have judgment, and you want judgment in a good pilot. And the other reason is, for instance, if something as minor as a breaker pops, computers can't reset those. It takes the human hand. It takes the human mind.
You're very analytical, and I can see you talking about percentages, and this doesn't happen, and so. But you know, the flying public, we wig out over something like this.
I understand.
We do.
I understand.
And like, next time you get on a plane, you're going to be looking at the door. People, so there's got to be a meeting, doesn't there?
Well, to go back to answer your question, I mean, there's, as you know from Malaysian Airlines, there are communications constantly going on between the aircraft and the ground, right? It could potentially be possible that if you had a live stream, I think this is incredibly expensive and unreasonable to do, but if you did, and you had an emergency and you were able to talk to maintenance or dispatch, perhaps they could remotely let you in.
But again, you personally,
it all comes down to money.
You don't think it's feasible financially?
I don't think it's reasonable.
Reasonable. Okay. All right, Ron. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Steve.
Good information.
Appreciate it.